When you have a large number of items in a spec, making manual edits using the spec editor can become a little time-consuming. Depending on the type of changes you're making, we have the ability to export our spec sheet to Excel, make the changes there instead. For adding things such as commodity codes or purchasing material codes, Excel is a much faster tool since you can take advantage of features such as formulas. There's a few things we have to be aware of, however, and we'll discuss them in the lesson. So let's run through the process and see how this will work. So we're going to go to our exercise file. So we're going to open our spec, desktop, exercise files, 0208, and let's look at our LinkedIn spec. We'll just quickly review what's in here. You can see we have the elbows, some flanges, gaskets, pipe, tees, and a couple of valves. So now I'm going to export this using the Export to Excel button just on the top left. Now we're going to make sure we export spec data. So the full spec data export is what we want to have here. And we're going to just browse to a location. And it's going to be desktop exercise files. And we'll export to Excel. I'm just going to call this Excel export. And we'll save. Hit OK. Now let's go and take a look at the spreadsheet. So from Excel, we're going to navigate out to our exercise files from desktop, exercise file, export to Excel, and this is our spreadsheet. So here's what we have. We have 3 tabs on our spreadsheet. We have our spec sheet, which is basically the view that you see when you open the spec, just the group headings and the range of sizes that we have. We have the branch table, which isn't set up yet, and we're looking for spec data. So you'll notice this has all the same headings that you see when you go into the edit parts function. So what we can do is just, if you expand these out, you can see the full descriptions. We have long description, short description. This should all be very familiar right now. What we're actually going to do is we're going to put some materials in here. So under materials, we're just going to scroll down to look for our piping. So anywhere we have our fittings. So we're going to start with our elbows. We're going to put in the carbon steel. And we can drag this down to cover everything that we need here. We can see our T, our flanges. All of these are going to be carbon steel. And when we come down to past our gaskets and our bolts, our valves, and we'll bring that to all the way through our piping as well. Oops, going too far. So there we go. So we have our carbon steel notation in here on the appropriate items. So we can go ahead and save this. Now we're going to come back to our spec. And let's take a look just quickly at our piping. And you can see the materials in here. And let's take a look at our valves. The material's not in here. So let's just import that in and we'll see that populate right the way through. So we're going to import from Excel. And we're going to get this table that allows us to resolve the changes. So if we scroll down, you can see any fields that we added the carbon steel to will be highlighted in bright yellow. So there we've added it to all the elbows and to the valves. And if you look down when we get to the pipe, you'll notice that it didn't highlight the carbon steel on the pipe because that field already existed. So it's not considered a change. So if we're happy with all those, we're going to come up to the top. And we're going to accept all changes. You can actually identify them one at a time and accept them one at a time. In this case, for speed, we're just going to say accept all the changes. You'll notice the yellow's gone. We're going to hit apply and OK. So now when we look in and we see our T, you'll see that carbon steel material has been added there. And if we look at our valves, it's the same. Now you see we've missed one there. So we can always just go in there and add that one manually. So there's a few things that we have to be aware of when we do this. I'm going to take a look back at our Excel spreadsheet again. If there's fields grayed out, so this is really important to understand. Once you export this spreadsheet, you can't add additional fields. So we can't go and add an additional size in here. If we export this with this many rows, we have to export back in with the same amount of rows. We can't add any columns, and we can't modify anything that's read-only. In addition, the column we have to be very careful about is there is a PNPID column in here. And what that is actually the unique identifier that every component has. and this is right here. You mustn't ever make modifications to this because this particular component that we're dealing with is known in the database by this number. So if we change that number, that component's no longer identified. So just make sure that the P&P ID number is never modified. You never move columns or add columns, and you cannot move or add the rows, where basically we have to export, add the information in the current state, and then re-import exactly as is. And that's extremely important to understand that. So you can see the export to Excel is a great feature, but don't forget to be mindful of the rules. Never add a row, move a column, or modify read-only data. And always be aware of the importance of the P&P ID column.